After 76 days, the lockdown in Wuhan, China ended on the 8th of April. The city of 11 million people was the original epicenter of the deadly coronavirus outbreak that is now raging across the globe. While lockdown measures are increasing in other parts of the world, Wuhan is returning to life. And the wet markets are back in business. In these visuals, vendors can be seen selling live crayfish. However, one market remained shuttered since the 1st of January, the WION seafood market, thought to be the starting point for the virus outbreak. A wet market, sometimes referred to as a wildlife market, sells live and dead animals, including fish, birds, badgers, bats, pangolins, and turtles for human consumption. Wet markets provide breeding sites for zoonotic diseases. The crowded lanes, unhygienic conditions, and the close proximity of stall vendors and visitors to these animals makes it easier for the virus to travel from one to the other. Researchers believe the new virus probably mutated from a coronavirus common in animals and jumped over to humans in the Wuhan wet market. The 2003 SARS outbreak had also emerged from a wet market. Despite a global uproar over these wet markets, China has reopened a few. Although there is a ban on selling wildlife now, the move is still controversial. The coronavirus crisis has many world leaders, lawmakers, and health officials calling for wet markets to be shut down permanently. But the plea appears to be falling on deaf ears in Beijing.
We must hope that this ban is permanent and that subsequently include wild animals used in China for other purposes, especially traditional medicine. This would set an example to all countries where wild animals are exploited for food, research, medicine, for their skins, or for trophies from animals hunted by the wealthy, such as rhinos for their horns, elephants for ivory, and others for heads stuffed and hung on the wall. In other words, countries all around the world.
British primatologist Jane Goodall, considered to be the leading voice for animal rights, believes a lack of respect for animals and their natural world caused the coronavirus pandemic. The 86-year-old scientist, best known for her lifelong study of chimpanzees, argued that destroying habitats has forced animals into closer proximity, ultimately spreading to humans.
One silver lining to this dark cloud. This pandemic has reopened discussions about the danger of the hunting, trafficking, and eating of wild animals. COVID-19 is one of those viruses that have crossed the species barrier and jumped from animals to humans. Evidence suggests that the host in this case was a bat, or possibly a pangolin, for sale in the wet market in the Chinese city of Wuhan, where live animals are sold for food. The SARS pandemic originated in a wet market in Guangdong, probably from a palm civet. The terrible HIV/AIDS pandemic came from viruses that jumped from monkeys and chimpanzees sold for meat in Central Africa. Chimpanzees and humans are closely related. We share 98.6% of our DNA, so that avoiding contact with them protects them from human infectious diseases, as well as us from theirs. So we must act not only to protect ourselves, but also great apes and other species as well.
United Nations Environment Chief Inga Anderson echoes a similar sentiment. She believes that nature is sending us a message with the coronavirus pandemic and the ongoing climate crisis. Anderson, Executive Director of the UN Environment Programme, said, and we quote, "Never before have so many opportunities existed for pathogen to pass from wild and domestic animals to people." It has been established that 75% of all emerging infectious diseases come from wildlife, which is why top conservationists have been urging authorities to put an end to live animal markets and the illegal global animal trade. For now, the coronavirus outbreak has prompted China to permanently ban trade of wild animals as food, but they can still be used as pets and traded for medicinal and ornamental uses. This presents a potential loophole, as traffickers may continue to exploit the exemptions to sell or trade live wildlife. The cultural roots of China's use of wild animals run deep and are not easy to weed out.
We can clearly see the great risks to the health and well-being of the rest of the world as a result of these types of places and facilities. It is important that when you're handling these types of food supplies and how they are provided to the public and how they're treated, these things can be very dangerous, as we've seen.
While emboldened wild animals are venturing into lockdown cities worldwide, stray animals are at a risk of starvation. Home to more than 150,000 stray cats, Istanbul is famous for its felines perching on rooftops, prowling narrow back streets, and resting at the entrance of nearly every building in the city. Now, the symbols of Europe's largest city are left without food and water as coronavirus has forced the city's residents into quarantine. Istanbul's Fatih municipality is trying its best to step in and save the strays by distributing food for cats, dogs, and even pigeons.
Since cafes and restaurants are closed and people do not get out, as Fatih Municipality Department of Health Affairs, we have increased the frequency of these feeding periods in compliance with an order by the Interior Ministry. We are personally distributing the food. We made an arrangement according to the animal population in the districts and we serve according to it.
Turkey has reported over 78,000 cases of COVID-19 as of the 18th of April. 60% of these are from Istanbul. Misconceptions about the disease have also led to pets being cruelly abandoned all over the world. In Belgium, many are avoiding cats after this news broke out. On March 29th, a domestic cat tested positive for COVID-19. The cat showed symptoms of diarrhea, vomiting, and coughing soon after its owner returned from northern Italy, where he got infected. A week later, he passed on the virus to his pet. This was the first documented case of a human-to-cat transmission. The cat made a full recovery 9 days later. Soon after, a bigger cat tested positive for COVID-19, this time at the Bronx Zoo in New York. The 4-year-old female Malayan tiger named Nadia contracted the virus from a zookeeper who was asymptomatic. Nadia, her sister Azul, as well as 2 Amur tigers and 3 African lions showed symptoms, including a dry cough after exposure to the employee. Authorities say that Nadia is showing signs of improvement. In India too, hungry stray dogs, cats and cows have been wandering to new places in search of food. These are the animals that are largely dependent on humans for food, but with most Indians locked up inside their homes, there is hardly anyone around to feed them. Thankfully, These furry creatures have some friends, like Manjari Chaitanya, a scientist from Bengaluru who is working round the clock to feed 2,000 to 2,500 stray animals every single day. Assisting her on this noble mission is a restaurant that has dedicated its kitchen and manpower to cook food for the starving animals in 2 batches.
Now the lockdown, we started cooking for 250 dogs. So we identified feeders from around our house and we rented pots from a tent house and started cooking for 500 dogs. And more volunteers from the area would come and pick up food. And then Vinay reached out one day and he said, we want to come and see and we'd like to do something very similar. And he came over with Niral. And then they said, why are you struggling? We have a kitchen and we have staff.
A partner of mine had been to Manjari's place. Once we landed there, we realized she and her husband are cooking for 500 dogs all by themselves. They're spending their entire day without having any support. And what is required, most important to people like her, is support. We want to do a social cause. We want to be a part of this, and we're doing this from the day one of lockdown for humans. We're doing about 1,000 meals from one of my other kitchen, and we've given more than 2,000 ration kits to people. But dog has always been my passion because I've always been around dogs from childhood. So I want to do something for them.
Another unexpected problem that has emerged during this pandemic is the addition of dogs and cats on the road. The COVID-19 outbreak has sparked pet desertions in various parts of the world. Activists in Latin America are scrambling to house and feed animals abandoned by owners who fear that their pets could infect them with the coronavirus.
Due to fake news and panic caused by misinformation, there are people who are abandoning their pets.
Padilla said she is responding to more than 150 messages a day, and reports of abandonment have doubled in recent times.
These 150 messages are double what I respond to on a daily basis, normally out of quarantine. I respond on average to 80 different messages, requests for help, especially situations of abuse, but the number of messages has actually doubled since I started the quarantine in Bogota.
Similar panic was seen in other cities too. Thousands of pets have been rendered homeless, and since they are not accustomed to life as a stray, unless rescued, their chances of survival are slim.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.5 bags. It is about 100 kilograms and it is enough for today and a half of tomorrow.
We don't live alone on this planet. There are animals and other creatures living with us that we have to care for.
Only 3 instances of pets being infected have been reported: a cat in Belgium and 2 dogs in Hong Kong. And scientists are clear that owners should not be alarmed just yet. There is no evidence of pets secreting enough coronavirus to transmit it back onto humans. However, owners, if infected, are recommended to quarantine themselves from their pets, much the same as other family members. Elise Letizier, a volunteer at a dog shelter in Paris, says they have received calls asking them to pick up dogs whose owners were hospitalized for COVID-19. Many of these canines will never be able to return home.
We are getting calls for people who have died or who have been hospitalized and will unfortunately not be able to get home, and so their dogs end up in complicated situations. We have the case of someone who has been hospitalized and will no longer be able to get out. The dogs have been abandoned, so we are going to take them.
This dog shelter is in full capacity with 49 dogs waiting for a new family. But in the 4th week of a strict lockdown in France, visits for pet adoptions have been suspended. With animal adoptions on hold, shelters are worried about man's best friends being the collateral victims of the coronavirus outbreak.
The big worry is that people can no longer bring dogs here. We had to stop the visits, which is normal. But we are an independent shelter which lives off donations. So if we can no longer welcome the public here, which is perfectly understandable in the situation we're in, people don't come. There are no more food donations and no more financial donations. So the situation can deteriorate quickly.
According to French law, a stray dog sent to an impound only has 8 days to be transferred to a shelter or be adopted before it is put down. Many of these dogs may eventually have to be euthanized for lack of adoptions. Animal shelters in all the lockdown cities are facing similar challenges. At this animal shelter in South Africa, the employees have quarantined themselves along with dozens of dogs, cats and horses to make sure that the four-legged residents are not left to fend for themselves during the virus crisis.
We're currently faced with COVID-19 and the lockdown that we have is the fact that we do not have volunteers visiting us. That means that the animals don't get as much attention as we would love to have.
On the other hand, various places are reporting an unprecedented interest in fostering and adopting shelter animals as well. People who are cooped inside their homes are turning to kittens and cats and puppies and dogs for comfort during these testing times.
Now with COVID-19 and all the restrictions that are going on, like everyone, our daughter's kind of stuck inside, and we thought now's a great time for her to find a new best friend forever in the form of Honey the Rabbit.
This video went viral recently. Employees at a Florida animal shelter were seen celebrating after a record number of dogs were adopted, leaving the cages empty. In India, macaques are a particularly familiar sight in human-dominated areas, especially near temples where people often feed them. But with devotees no longer being allowed to venture out, a troop of hungry monkeys was sighted near a deserted temple complex in the Gorakhpur district. Even in Thailand's Lopburi province, hundreds of hungry monkeys were seen fighting over a single banana. Coronavirus has caused a huge drop in the numbers of tourists who feed them. Footage shows primates crossing a road to chase a single monkey who has managed to get hold of a banana. As people across the world remain indoors to slow the spread of the coronavirus, these animals are struggling, but there are many heartwarming stories as well. With roads and public places lying deserted, videos of animals reclaiming spaces have been trending on social media. In a never-seen-before sight, coyotes were spotted in San Francisco. These wild animals are native to California, but were nearly wiped off in the 1990s by hunting and poisoning. In the Chilean capital of Santiago, a young cougar surprised residents of a central neighborhood. It was spotted padding through the streets, left almost empty after a widespread shutdown to contain the coronavirus. The big cat traveled through several private gardens and entered a school before being darted and recovered by Chilean wildlife officials.
He's a juvenile, a sub-adult, at least more than a year. We estimate him a year and a half, a year 2 months approximately. For the teeth, he looks in good condition.
In Karnataka, India, elephants were seen sauntering down the roads in the Kodagu district of the state. The herd of elephants, along with their calves, walked on empty roads as officials recorded their movement on their phones. Another overwhelming scene from India, with no human intrusion due to the lockdown, lakhs of endangered olive ridleys in Odisha's Rushikulya rookery have returned to dig nests and lay eggs. In Mexico, a beach has been taken over by crocodiles who came out to bask in the sun in the absence of human beings. The Mexican government has shut down all its tourist spots since the beginning of April. With the humans locked away, these animals are definitely up to some play. East London, locals were left shocked when a herd of fallow deer was seen grazing on the lawns in front of a housing estate.
My little girl thinks that Santa sent the reindeers because we're all locked down, so we can keep an eye on everyone and make sure everyone's safe.
From deer to goats, more than a dozen great Orm Kashmiri oats descended on Llandudno, a coastal town in Wales. Locals have seen them before, but they don't often wander about. These dogs are on duty. Scientists from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine claim that specially trained sniffer dogs could help identify carriers of COVID-19, helping in containing the spread of the disease. In the past, they have been trained to detect diseases like cancer, Parkinson's, and bacterial infections by sifting samples in the center's training room and indicating when they have found it in the real world.
We know that dogs have this amazing ability to smell and to learn smells. And so if COVID-19 has a smell and a distinctive smell, then we would be able to train dogs to detect it.
6 weeks should be sufficient in order to train these dogs, get them out actually working and finding this disease real.
Meanwhile, as COVID-19 continues its rampage around the globe, labs across the world are scrambling to find animals for coronavirus studies. Numerous vaccines for COVID-19 are under development, and many have been cleared for animal testing by the World Health Organization. Even as you watch this show, chances are vaccine samples are being inserted into ferrets, considered to be ideal candidates for evaluating antiviral treatment. For the sake of humans and animals, let's hope that a cure for the coronavirus is not too far away.